Hey, good early morning, everyone. Welcome to Grounded with John Tester and Maritza Giorgio. And joining us today, right off the bat, the Glenn Kirschner, former federal prosecutor, former JAG, host of Justice Matters on YouTube and Substack, all around awesome guy. Hey, Glenn, thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Maritza. Good morning, Senator. Great to be with you.
Uh,
You
we
know,
have,
I
Go ahead.
think the last time excuse me, Maritza,
I'm sorry.
I interrupted. I think the last time I saw you in person, now Maritza's probably seen you since, was at the drain end of the swamp, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right. We were on stage together. That was fun.
Well,
We
Glenn
was.
and I had a wild kind of story
I
because
mean, yeah.
we were last time I saw Glenn, we were at the Substack party the night of the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and we kinda got well, we were in lockdown, I guess, for a little bit in there, and we were there, and, I brought Glenn over because I was talking to the actor Michael Chiklis, fellow Greek, and we were talking just about, like, the state of the world, and I said, "Oh, we gotta bring Glenn into this conversation," so I brought Glenn over, and we ended up talking for a long time. It was really, like, a fabulous conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was nice to get to know Michael and his wife, and he even convinced me to buy some of his daughter's tequila, Pink Pig tequila, and I
Ooh.
did, and it's pretty darn good. So
Did you
that
get
was
it?
that was a pleasant surprise to get to hang out with you and Michael Chiklis. You know, as a gutter kid from Jersey, I don't expect to meet anybody in my lifetime, and yet here I am, meeting folks like the senator here and Chiklis and others. So it's been a real pleasure.
No, it
So
was
it's
awesome.
it's it's the same with me as a dirt farmer from north central Montana. I still ask myself how and why I was ever elected as U.S. senator. But I get to meet people like Maritza Giorgio, a Greek, and Glenn Kirschner, uh, who, by the way, we got to tell Maritza, you need to talk a little bit about for our viewers Glenn's background, so people know who the hell Glenn is.
Well, I just did a little bit. I mean, Glenn.
But didn't he used to be? He used to be a JAG, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Army JAG, 6.5 years. I started prosecuting court-martial cases back in the 80s in Alaska, which was my first active duty assignment, and prosecuted everything from AWOL to espionage. And after 6.5 years active duty, the Army tends to promote you out of the courtroom. And I would have spent the rest of my time in the Army supervising other JAG lawyers. I wasn't interested in leaving the courtroom ever, and I never did. So I left the Army, joined the Department of Justice, the DC U.S. Attorney's Office, where I spent 24 years trying predominantly murder and RICO cases, working for Bob Mueller when he was chief of homicide. He taught me how to run the section. Not long after he left, I took over the homicide section and was responsible for overseeing all grand jury investigations involving homicide, all murder prosecutions in the courts of DC. And it was a really great 30-plus year run as a Fed. And then when see, I'm doing my own intro now. I feel like I'm
No,
hogging
I like
the
it.
I like
time.
that. I like it a lot. We get the word from the man himself. That's good.
Yeah. And then when I retired from the Department of Justice, I did not have this on my bingo card. Being what, independent legal analyst on social media, but after about 6.5 years with MSNBC as an on-air legal analyst, a little over a year ago, I said, I'm done with corporate media. I was a journalism major undergrad.
Yeah.
And now it's all independent all day. So whether it's going on with Jim Acosta or talking with Scott McFarland or, Don Lemon, or it's a great sort of community of independent media that I think we've built here. Maritza and the senator, you are obviously part of that now. We are straight to the people, unfiltered, truthful, accurate information. We try to push back against the propaganda this administration
Mhm.
is always spewing into the public square. And this is really a really gratifying, I guess, professional chapter 3 for me at this point.
It's so fun, and it's so I don't know, it's so rewarding for me, Glenn, and I think if I can, just make an assumption, I think it's rewarding for you too because you do these nightly check-ins, these videos where you check in with your community, and, like, they're just I love to listen to them because they're so authentic and so real, and you're really just connecting with the people in your Justice Matters community, and I think it's such a service right now because so many people in my life feel lost. They don't know how to process everything. They wanna talk about it, but it's contentious in some circles. So I love what you're doing every night. It's really cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and not to plug my Substack, but 8:30 PM Eastern Time every night, and I don't put anything behind a paywall. Nobody has to pay me a penny to hear me run
Yeah.
my mouth or watch my videos, but every night for about 30 minutes, we talk about the legal issue of the day. I try to translate it from legalese into English, and we also talk about different ways to engage that maybe aren't intuitive, engage in this fight for the rule of law, for the Constitution, for democracy, and right now, community is everything because people are feeling anxious and left out and despondent and oppressed. And so the community that we are all building, I think, is going to help get us through this dark time.
It is good to have you here. The question I have is you talk about the show every night, 8:30 Eastern, is that what you said?
Yeah,
8:30 Eastern for half an hour?
yeah.
How do you boil each day's legal activities down to a half an hour?
Yeah, it's tough. What I try to do, and I'm basically up at working from 6 a.m. till about 9:30 or 10 p.m. every night, which is a self-inflicted wound. But when you're fighting for democracy, it's not really a job. This is mission. I got a lot of kids and grandkids, and what are we going to leave them? But so I just try to figure out like what is the most important legal development for people to understand, and that's what I try to tackle. I do it on my YouTube channel every day with an original legal analysis video. I also do it in partnership with Brian Tyler Cohen on the
Mhm.
legal breakdown. We do a video damn near every day on his channel. He has a mega footprint. And, I pick one of the Trump outrages, and that's what I try to focus on.
So can I ask you something that Maurice is probably gonna ask about at the end of the show that I'm
Oh
gonna
god, here we go.
top? But is it Maritza, you'll have to help me on this because 'cause you're the one that told me about it yesterday, I did not see it. Andy Kim got, tear gassed yesterday, is that correct?
Oh, yeah, he was out so there was,
So
like, a big protest outside of the ICE detention center, and they broke it up, and Senator Andy Kim was tear gassed.
yeah, and Andy Kim is the senator from your state of New Jersey, as a matter of fact.
He's
Rhodes
and he's
Scholar
a wonderful, wonderful public servant.
Rhodes Scholar, smart dude. Um, doesn't seem to me quite right that, ICE should be tear gassing a US senator, just like they tackled, the senator from California here 8, 9 months ago, for walking into a meeting and asking a question. God forbid, why would anybody hold anybody accountable? Um, what's Kim's options here? He's a public servant. Is he just gotta live with it? Or, what can happen over this? This seems to me to be nothing short of insane, just like the incident in California a few months ago with Kristi Noem and the senior senator from California.
The way I see it, Senator, he's got 3 options. One is and listen, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When you're a prosecutor, everything looks like a criminal prosecution, or at least a criminal investigation, as long as we have adequate predication, fancy term for enough evidence to launch a criminal investigation. First, I would report it to the local law enforcement authorities because it may very well be an assault. It may also be a violation of his constitutional rights against being unreasonably seized. Again, that's a fancy term for if the police put their hands on you or hit you with a rubber bullet or tear gas you. And it's not reasonable, as that term has been defined over the decades and centuries in the Fourth Amendment. There's a prohibition against an
Oh,
unreasonable
can you
seizure.
hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Did you lose us, Senator?
I I'm here. Are you here? Can you
Yeah.
hear me?
Yeah. Are you okay?
Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
I couldn't, but that's fine. Go ahead. That's
Okay.
all
Okay.
right. Go ahead.
So I think his first option is report it to the local authorities because it may be a violation of state law. He may have been assaulted, right? And what we have seen, all across the country, particularly in these, horrific immigration enforcement sweeps, we have seen both violations of people's constitutional rights, and we have seen crimes being committed by these masked marauders, right? And listen, I am the biggest fan and supporter of police. I worked with them my entire career, first military and then civilian. But what these masked ICE agents are doing is not law enforcement, it's terrorizing communities. Um, and the good news is we now have two criminal indictments of ICE agents for committing state crimes.
In
And
Minnesota, yes,
yeah,
we do.
one in Minnesota, and I think there's a second one in another state. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there are two. Um, and so Representative Kim should report it to the authorities and see if they will open a criminal investigation of the incident. He can consider filing a civil suit if he thinks he has a basis for it. It can be very hard to successfully sue federal employees, but it's not impossible. And then I think his third remedy is use this to inspire congressional hearings because I
Mm.
think congressional hearings are the next best step overall once hopefully the Dems take control of the House come the midterms, because then the Dems better wear out the administration performing the oversight that has been lacking under Republican control.
So I agree with you 100%. Here's my concern, though, and I've said this before on this show, is that the Democrats will take a majority in the House. They may well take it in the Senate too.
Mm.
This president does not respect the rule of law, never has respected the rule of law as long as he's been alive. He's manipulated the law to his advantage every step of the way in the private sector, and now we're seeing it in the public sector. He's going to give them the middle finger if they say we want you to come to Congress to testify, to hold people accountable. What the hell's Congress going to do? Short of impeachment, what can Congress do?
What happened to the inherent power of contempt in Congress? Listen, I do not believe in making political calculations when it comes to enforcing the rules or the rule of law. And I think the same holds true for the courts. If you are defying subpoenas, well, Congress has the inherent power of contempt, and the courts have the power of both civil and criminal contempt. I think it's a damn shame. I think the courts have been holding strong for the most
Mhm.
part, but I think it's a damn shame that all they do is author, scorched earth opinions saying the Trump administration has now violated, the law 9,000 times in the immigration arena. Well, hey, Judge, you've got the power of contempt. Set show cause hearings, force the government, the administration, to show cause why they shouldn't be held in contempt and either fined or jailed. Like we have judges in DC like Judge Royce Lamberth, right? He is a lion in criminal justice circles. I had the pleasure of trying a 6-month RICO trial in front of him. We got to know each other really well when you're in court together every day for 6 months. Um, that man, that judge, has held more people in contempt than I can count. Government officials, he held the entire EPA in contempt when they violated his orders. What's wrong with
Right.
using those powers of the other branch of government, the judiciary, to hold the Trump administration's feet to the fire? But I've seen a reluctance to, issue show cause orders and hold people in contempt, and that works to the detriment. That's feeding into to Trump's hands.
It's so bizarre, just like this fear of doing anything. It's so bizarre to me to watch Glenn. I do wanna mention Senator, we have some comments, and I do agree. I mean, like, Senator Andy Kim, Senator Padilla, yes, they, were Senator Padilla was brought down to the ground, Senator Andy Kim was tear gassed, but other people are getting tear gassed too, people who are not in public office, and maybe we don't see it every day, but we need to pay attention to what ICE and these officers are doing to every single person because, it gets a lot of attention when it's a
Th
US citizen.
there's no doubt about that, Maritza. I guess my point is if they're tear gassing a US senator, they're tear gassing everybody.
Right.
That's
Yes.
the point. The point
Right.
is that
Good
if
point.
there's no line for anything, then shit, they're probably tear gassing one another. They're throwing that shit around all over the place. I have no idea. But the truth is, it is inappropriate to be, in my opinion, Glenn, you can add to this. I think it's inappropriate to be using tear gas as a response unless it's a situation where life and death is there, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And there have been federal judges who have issued orders to ICE, to the administration, not to use tear gas. I think maybe Judge April Perry was one of those judges.
Mm.
And they disobey these orders flagrantly. So
Yeah.
that's why you have to take the next step and hold them in contempt. You have to do that.
Okay, so I want to move on to some other headlines, some other legal headlines. I'll be curious to see what legal topic you choose for tonight, Glenn, because there's just such a goodie bag to choose from every single day. But I do want to talk about today's "Let Them Eat" ballroom news because the DOJ is now using a shooting outside the White House over the weekend to again ask a federal judge to lift an injunction stalling that Golden Ballroom project. And the DOJ says the shooting underscores the need for, quote, top level, state of the art security at the White House, including the ballroom. So, what am I missing here, folks? How would a ballroom have stopped this? I don't understand.
So last night in our community meeting and last night on my YouTube channel, I went a little bit lighter and a little bit more irreverent. I know this is not a light topic, but I'm glad you asked about this because here is I'm not going to call it a court filing. I'm going to call it a social media post because it clearly looks like the Department of Justice is now letting Donald Trump write court filings. I'm not
Good.
making that up. That's not an exaggeration because the way this thing reads, and we could spend an hour, I could just take this apart both legally and factually. It reads like a typical 2 a.m. unhinged social media post by Donald Trump, full of typos and inexplicable capitalization and lots of exclamation points. And the hyperbole in here is absurd. And let me do the legal piece first. It's captioned a notice of supplemental authority. That's a term of art. It means judge, we just found new court precedent, or a court of appeals just issued a new opinion, and the legal precedent of that opinion helps our case. So we need to do what? We need to file a notice of supplemental authority. There's not a single court case or legal site in this 4-page rant. It's just Trump yammering on using words that I don't even think he understands. But here's why I went a little bit lighter last night, and then we can get to the serious. Multiple times in this, he asserts that the ballroom will be hermetically sealed. You know, the last time I heard hermetically sealed, it was when Ed McMahon was holding envelopes up to his head, saying to Karnak the Magnificent, Johnny Carson, these envelopes have been hermetically sealed in a mayonnaise jar on Funkin' Wagnall's porch since noon today. Nobody. And you know what? I promise you, Maritza, Donald Trump heard that hermetically sealed, which means there's no oxygen in the ballroom either, by the way. And and he just keeps saying the ballroom's going to be hermetically sealed. It's absurd. But this shows you why the Department of Justice has lost what's called the presumption of regularity with federal judges from coast to coast. I enjoyed it my whole career. And all it means is when we walked in the court and we made a factual assertion or we said a case stands for a certain proposition, the courts believed us. They credited what we had to say. Why? Because as a federal prosecutor, you don't walk into court and make up shit and you don't put lies in court filings. And yet that's what the federal judiciary is getting every day from Todd Blanche's Department of Justice, Donald Trump's Department of Justice. So, this ridiculous court filing will probably um, be given its due by Judge Richard Leon, who was the presiding judge. I've appeared before Judge Leon in D.C. And it will basically be disregarded. I would reject the filing if I were the judge, and I would say
Mm.
if somebody at the department wants to file a proper notice of supplemental authority, I will look at it. Um, but this is where the Department of Justice is. The ballroom, Judge Leon will continue to fight using the rule of law against any illegality or unconstitutionality involved in building the ballroom. And Trump will probably largely ignore it and continue to move forward doing whatever he damn well pleases.
So, what would you do right now, Glenn? Like, if you were still at the DOJ
Mm.
and this shit was coming down and you're watching it, like, what have you thought about that? How you would react if this was happening and you were still there?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I struggled on the decision whether to retire or not from the Department of Justice. It was during the first Trump term. I saw things getting very dark, and I won't say I fled the Department of Justice, but I had years in service and I had the age to take a retirement. So my wife and I, my better three quarters, sat down and we tried to make a decision. And I said, you know, I've been trying murder cases forever. Let's try something different. And then I saw my colleagues, my friends, people I supervised and tried cases with, head up the Oath Keepers prosecutions, the Proud Boys prosecution. And, you know, I kind of regretted my decision because I wanted to be shoulder to shoulder with them trying those cases. I would have gone back to the department had Kamala Harris won in any capacity. I don't pretend I'm ever going to be presidentially appointed to anything, including dog catcher at the White House. But but now I'm looking forward to going back in January 2029, assuming you know
Oh,
we right the American ship. I want to be part of the accountability mission, and we could talk about that. What I would do now if I was at the Department of Justice, I would quit because I couldn't work under this corrupt leadership. I couldn't be part of it. I would have stayed on the inside and fought against it as long as I could, but I couldn't be part of this. And it would be a tough decision because there are still like 90,000 hardworking career public servants at the Department of Justice
right.
keeping their head down and trying to do the work of the American people every day, but Todd Blanche won't let them. So they are self-selecting and leaving.
I I got it, Glenn, and I understand that, but there's the argument to be made, if all the people leave, then we really have no laws that are gonna be enforced in this country.
Yeah.
And so even though it's gotta be frustrating as hell and shorten your lifespan by many, many decades, if you're in that job, if all those guys if and gals leave, we're over the next 2 years, he can do incredible damage regardless who's in Congress, because Congress has been AWOL for the last damn near 2 years now.
Yeah, no, I agree, Senator, and I think it's an intensely personal decision. Do you stay on the inside and fight and do the right thing and ultimately suffer a wrongful termination and then have to spend the next couple of years, if you choose, suing the federal government for wrongfully terminating you? That's one choice to make. Or the other choice is to opt out and fight like hell from outside of government. But those are intensely personal and difficult
Yeah.
decisions.
We have people in the chat saying Glenn for AG in 2029. I could get on board with that, Glenn. I could and then we'll have people saying John Tester for president again because that generally comes up in these
So
chats.
let me just say this, Glenn, if I get elected president, you're my AG, buddy.
Oh,
Alright.
I'm there. You would probably be the only person on earth, Senator, who would nominate me because I'm probably not confirmable, everything that I have said.
Yeah, you're going through the vetting process,
I
if we
don't
can
know.
run
Have you
those
seen some of
fair.
the people in the cabinet
Oh,
today, Glenn?
oh, the cacistocracy that we've got working right now is insane.
If
It's
you've
ins
ever had imposter syndrome, folks, which I've dealt with my whole life, like, this cabinet's really good for that to make you feel better. Okay, you brought up the Proud Boys and J6. We gotta talk about all of this with you, because after the announcement of the settlement over this l Trump's lawsuit against his own IRS and the creation of this fund, $1.776 billion to basically pay out J6 rioters, what they're calling the weaponization fund. The DOJ actually started removing web pages that listed charges, convictions, other details about the J6 defendants, and they put it on DOJ Rapid Response on X. They wrote, "We will do everything in our power to make whole those who were persecuted for political purposes. This includes stripping DOJ's website of partisan propaganda." So, both of you, I mean, Glenn, I don't know where you were on J6. I think we're about to find out where you were on J6, but Senator Tester, he was in the Capitol watching this all come down. I mean, how can you watch this video of all of the different angles of the Capitol that day and call it partisan propaganda? Like, it makes me so mad as somebody who was sitting here watching it on TV. You guys were in DC.
I'll defer to the senator to go first because he had boots on the ground, during the Capitol attack.
Yeah, well, I can just tell you that I thought that there was gonna be a ton of dead people. I've never seen people run up those steps on the outside of the Capitol unless you're a policeman or a US senator, and then there were hundreds of people running up those steps, and when that happened, I said to myself, "This is gonna get ugly, and it's gonna get ugly fast." They did, like normal police people, they did their job much better than I would have done, and they maintained control without being a bunch of people getting killed. Enough of them got killed as it was. But to say that these folks didn't do anything, to say that they were a bunch of tourists like we heard before, police officers got hurt and killed. People got killed. That is not a group of goddamn tourists in the Capitol. And for the president to be so cute to set up a $1.776 billion fund, just like we're going to train officers for 47 days for the 47th president, shows you how, quite frankly, dishonest and unprofessional this whole administration is. Because the truth is now you've got ICE officers, trained for 47 days that don't know what the hell they're doing and ignore the Constitution across the board, which you know very, very well, being an attorney. And now you're going to set up a fund of 1.76 billion to fund a bunch of people who tried to overthrow the election in this country. And anybody that says, oh, they weren't there for that reason, they were there because they just wanted to, do their freedom of speech, is total bullshit. Total bullshit. You had senators running for their lives. You had a vice president that was running for his life. And by the way, if they'd have caught him, they'd have killed him. And it's crazy. It's just crazy. And you got a president of the United States who, by the way, comes right out of the goddamn mob. Everything he says sounds like a mobster and goes, "Well, these are my boys, and they did this and it's just fine with me. So we're going to set up a fund and we're going to give 'em money for life. And by the way, that money is going to come from honest, hardworking taxpayers in this country." It's crazy. Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, I agree with you, Senator. There are no words to describe the depravity of taking our tax dollars and giving it to people who beat the hell out of police officers, were investigated, indicted, tried, convicted, and sentenced for their crimes we all saw with our own eyes.
You bet.
And then Donald Trump first pardons them and now wants to pay them for beating police officers and breaking into the Capitol, destroying property, stealing things, defecating on the wall, on the on the Capitol floor. And the the fact that this is what Donald Trump wants to do for rioters, attackers, insurrectionists has always made clear to me that he doesn't back the blue. He backs those who beat the blue, plain and simple. If there's any, I always look for the points of light amidst the Trump induced darkness. And if there's any point of light, there are already 3 lawsuits filed. And I think they will succeed in putting a stop to this. I think we'll probably see first a temporary restraining order and then a preliminary injunction to freeze everything so payouts don't begin to be made. But what I see Trump doing is using the courts to try to launder basically all of his criminal conduct. And now Todd Blanche is complicit in these crimes. I see this as a conspiracy to commit a theft of government property, taxpayers' dollars, and giving it to whomever, Donald Trump's friends, family, associates, the boots of the insurrection that he ordered to attack the Capitol that day. He said, fight like hell or you won't have a country anymore. Now go to the Capitol and stop the certification, stop the steal. From a prosecutor's perspective, I love that he lied and called it a steal. That provides evidence of criminal intent. The January 6th case, the 4 felony charges that were being litigated at the time he got reelected, at the time the case was dismissed without prejudice, they were being litigated by Judge Tanya Chutkan to see if they survived the presidential immunity ruling. And I have no doubt she would have ruled, of course they survive. These are not core constitutional functions of a president, nor are they official governmental acts of a president that would enjoy presumptive immunity. These are the acts of a candidate trying to
Right.
steal an election, quite frankly. So the good news, and I do want to talk about the slush fund, but the good news from my perspective Both the classified documents case, which was in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals and would have been reversed, the dismissal, and sent back to a trial court, hopefully to a judge who was not biased in favor of Donald Trump. That case and the J6 prosecution against Donald Trump, they both need to move forward once he is no longer in power, because they're both viable cases and important cases for American democracy. They must be tried to fruition, win, lose, or draw. Anyway, going back to the slush fund, I see this as Donald Trump trying to launder his dirt
Mhm.
through the courts. So, first of all, we know that this was not a legitimate lawsuit that he brought. Why? Because he is always beating his chest and bloviating about how he's the all powerful Article 2 emperor. I own everything and everyone in the executive branch. I can fire people for no cause. I can do anything I want. That's a quote. Constitution lets me do anything I want.
Yep.
Well, that means you're suing yourself, sport. It means you, as the plaintiff, are suing you as another part of the executive branch. And the judge would have dismissed the case because there was no case or controversy. It's not something that the federal judiciary has jurisdiction to do when somebody's suing. You have to have two adversaries bumping heads with adversarial positions in litigation. She would have dismissed it, and she was signaling that was the way she was going. So instead, he dismissed his own case, moved to dismiss his own case, and said, and I'm going to use it as a vehicle to give myself control over a $1.7 billion slush fund to pay out whomever I choose or whomever my board of commissioners chooses to pay. Um, the whole thing is dirty and unlawful, and I would argue unconstitutional because only Congress can appropriate this money from jump. It's all unlawful from jump. And, to say that it does a disservice to the men and women of law enforcement, 140 of them who had the hell beat out of them that day, it is a gross understatement. But the other thing that I see a connection here between this and the motions to dismiss the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers seditious conspiracy convictions. Those cases are over and done. And yet Janine Pirro, God help us, who's the U.S. attorney in my former beloved home, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, filed a motion with the court. She said, we're moving to dismiss those convictions because it's in the interests of justice to do so. Steve Bannon filed a motion like that too. None of the three trial court judges have ruled on those motions yet. They're still pending. But
Oh.
you know what they're doing? They're, again, trying to launder shit through the courts. Why? Because if a judge signs that motion to dismiss, when Janine Pirro said it's in the interest of justice to dismiss these convictions, you know what the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and Bannon are going to do? They're going to hold up that dismissal and say, look, the judge signed the motion dismissing it in the interests of justice. What does that mean? It means I was wrongfully prosecuted in the first instance and I need money from the slush fund. And that's making the courts tacitly complicit in this criminal scheme. So I hope to hell all three of those judges, if I were a judge, which I would never be, I would order Janine Pirro to appear, take the stand. I'd put her under oath and I would wear her out and say, you asserted in this motion, it's in the interest of justice to dismiss seditious conspiracy convictions handed down by jurors. You need to present evidence. You prove to me that it's in the interest of justice. And she couldn't. And I would then say, motion denied. Go ahead and appeal me.
I don't know, I think you should be a judge, Glenn.
I don't know. I don't know if the black robe would look good on him.
Mm-mm. I'm with
Yeah.
I'm with you, Senator. I couldn't be a referee. I need to be in the game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're a fighter. Speaking of fighters, though, I do wanna play this clip because, we talk about these moments of light, right? And I've said this before, and I try not to get, too hopeful that some of our friends in the Senate will do the right thing because I thought they were gonna do the right thing after J6, and, for a couple days, it looked like they might, but then here we are. Here we are again. But I wanna show you this clip because there was this explosive meeting on the Hill last week. Acting AG Todd Blanche went up and met with a bunch of these GOP senators to try to, like, bring them on board with this fund, and they were pissed. They were angry, and I wanna play for you what Tom Tillis said this weekend on CNN.
this week, I was called a rhino by the president. And I will tell you, if the Republican Party stands for standing with insurrectionists to assaulted police officers, turning a blind eye towards Putin and what he's doing in Russia, negotiating a deal that may be subpar to the Obama deal, then don't call me that Republican. Just call me a conservative. And I'm waiting for my Republicans to come back if, in fact, they think they can argue that effectively. They can't. The American people want right of center conservative policies that have been successfully proposed by this president. These distractions are harmful to our chances in November, and anybody that gets in the way of my colleagues, Republican colleagues, getting reelected are a problem.
Okay, so he called it this slush fund stupid on stilts. And I mean, we know that Tom Tillis is done. This is his, he's done when they swear in new senators in January. But what do you think? Do you think that between him and some of these other senators who are losing their seats, like Bill Cassidy in Louisiana, do you think that we're going to start to see some actual movement, you guys?
I think we already have. Um, I think we've seen Cassidy and the war, for example, already start to move, and we saw Tillis. I will tell you from my perspective, though, the people who really need to stand up are the leadership, the Republican leadership in the Senate. Thune knows right from wrong here, and he knows bullshit. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. He's not. I'll get criticized for saying this, but Thune isn't a wackadoodle. He's a decent guy, and he needs just to make sure that his backbone is strong and stand up to this guy. Because the truth is, just like Bill Cassidy, who did almost everything the president wanted him to do, unless you do 100% what this president wants, he's gonna go back on you anyway. And so why not, as Glenn Kirschner would say, why not go out standing on principles and values instead of just caving to somebody that they know is not right. I got one question for Glenn before he goes into this, by the way, for what because and that is that is the fact this slush fund and giving people who tried to overthrow an election on January 6th, is this just a signal to send to the folks who, uh, you know,
Mm.
for the presidential or even congressional folks get sworn in too, that if you go up the Capitol and raise hell, you're going to make some money off of this?
It's a great point, Senator. It's a recruiting call. I have called this a recruiting call all along, from the pardons in the first instance to the payouts for beating cops now, or the attempted payouts. I still think the federal judiciary will put a stop to it. It's a recruiting call, right? He's saying, if you commit crimes in my name, at my direction, for my benefit, not only will you not be held criminally accountable because I'll pardon you, I'll pay you. There's a payday at the end of the tunnel. So you know what? Just like I told you to fight like hell and go to the Capitol and stop the steal on January 6th, 2021, I may need to deploy you to the polls all around the country for the midterms, or I may need to deploy you in the next presidential election, and I've got your back. You said, Senator, if you do 100% of what Donald Trump does, maybe he won't throw you under the bus. I think he'll still throw you under the bus. Kristi Noem was pretty damn dirty in doing all kinds of unlawful and unconstitutional shit for the benefit of and at the direction of Donald Trump, and she got thrown under the bus. So
Fair,
nobody is safe,
fair point.
right? So yeah, that's the way I see it. On the political front, I mean, I'm glad to see some Republicans standing up. I mentioned maybe before we went live, as a young man, I voted for Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. And then as an older and wiser, and I'd like to think kinder man, I've learned a couple of things. I voted for Barack Obama and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and I'm not sure I'd ever vote for another Republican, but never say never. There are principled Republicans out there, Senator. You've probably worked with a lot of them. Um, I am always hopeful. Look, I'll never give the Republican Party or the members of Congress, Republican members of Congress, a pass, and I'll never stop urging them to do the right thing. I have always said we have fought through a lot of troubled times in this country. And there was a time when really standing up and doing the right thing meant, picking up muskets and stepping onto open grassy fields and shooting, fighting brother on brother in an effort to save the Union. Today's Republicans don't have to do any of that. All they have to do is cross the aisle. to save the union, to save democracy. It shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be too much to ask. And yet, what we have seen is a Republican Party that's just laid down and let Donald Trump walk all over them and their constitutional authority and their obligation to be a check on executive branch abuse and overreach and corruption. So I'm glad to see some members of the Republican Party in Congress standing up. I hope we see more of it.
Yeah, I would just say this. If you take a look, Tillis is one of the guys that the big beautiful bill didn't match up with his state very well, and he represented his constituents. Um, Bill Cassidy did the right thing, and he voted for impeachment. And I think if it was done again today, he'd still vote for impeachment. And so did many others. Mitt Romney, who's no longer there, and a bunch of other folks. Okay, Ben Sass, others. But the bottom line is that if if you're worried about Donald Trump taking your job out and that's your main motivation, he's done a pretty good job of that. I mean, if you take a look at the primaries over the last month, Indiana, the folks who didn't vote for
Mhm.
redistricting, I think 4 out of the 6 got beat, which is crazy because Indiana knows better than that. Cassidy gets beat. You
We're
know,
probably gonna see it today.
Cornyn's probably going to get beat today. I don't think Trump would have endorsed the other dude, which I can't even remember his
Ken
name.
Paxton.
Paxton. He wouldn't endorse Paxton if the polls didn't show that he was going to win. I mean, if Cornyn showed he was going to win, I don't think he'd endorse Paxton. So, and John Cornyn, by the way, is as as Tillis said, he might call him a rhino, but he's goddamn conservative. I served with him, man. He's a hard cookie. But but the bottom line is that for all this stuff, if the job is more important than representing your constituents, you're going to fold.
I don't get it. I thought growing up that there was a sort of baseline of patriotism below which nobody would sink. No politician would sink. And I was dead wrong about that. And I still don't understand how the Republicans can look themselves in the mirror, can look at their family, their children, and say they're doing the right thing.
Tillis had a pretty good joke, though, about Ken Paxton in that interview. I actually clipped it because it was pretty funny. Let me play it.
Call Paxton ethically challenged is to call Jeffrey Dahmer suffering from an eating disorder. This guy is an empty suit and will do us no service by being in the U.S. Congress.
I like I don't know how Jake Tapper kept a straight face.
Tell us has a way with words. What can I say? He's gonna retire out of the Senate. He's gonna make a lot of money, I think, being a talking head on these goddamn on media. There's no doubt about it because he can string a line of bullshit together pretty good.
So,
Truthfully,
Glenn, there are so many other legal issues. I mean, like when I was trying to think of what we would talk about today, I mean, I think about this, what I'm calling the seashell indictment, right?
Mm.
With Comey, with Comey seashells.
Huh.
I'm thinking about the war in Iran. I'm thinking about the Epstein insanity that we've seen, and also one that I really think we've stopped talking about, but is equally important is this effort to just kill people, and say that they're on drug boats in the
Mm.
Caribbean, just like these boat strikes one after the other without any kind of charges that I've seen or proof that that's what is happening, that they have these big amounts of drugs that they're shipping to the United States. So, I mean, is there one
Hmm.
and then we have the J6 fund, we have suing your own government. Like, was there one big legal issue that you think is, like, the biggest or the most consequential facing us right now in the US?
Yeah, there's so many. I think it is the destruction of the rule of law because without the rule of law, nothing is possible in a free, fair democracy. Nothing. And I think the rule of law kind of is the umbrella under which all of these abuses reside, the ones that you just named. I want to talk about 8647. I want to talk
Mm.
about the murder of people on boats in international waters, and I want to talk about Iran. And let me try to be succinct, which is impossible for me because I ramble on forever about everything. Let me start with the seashells because that's a real rule of law issue. the gross abuse of the rule of law. I mean, I keep saying that, Trump and company are trying to walk the rule of law deep into the woods and shoot it dead. And we can't let them. And the here's the great news. Here's the silver lining. Here's the points of light. The grand jurors and the trial jurors are they're just us. They're just we the people. They're just regular folk. And it shows the power of the people. When grand jurors sitting as the conscience of the community tell people like Janine Pirro, hell no, go away. We are not going to endorse your prosecutorial abuse, seeking to indict a guy who threw a sandwich at a police officer that bounced off the officer's bulletproof vest. That guy, Sean Dunn, was a DOJ paralegal, by the way, who was so incensed that the streets of his city, DC, were being militarized, and he lost his cool and he tossed the sandwich. Now, public service announcement from this old prosecutor: don't throw sandwiches at the police. Don't do it. It's an assault. More specifically, it's a battery. It's a misdemeanor, but don't do it. So Janine Pirro walks into the grand jury by proxy and tries to convince 23 citizens sitting as the conscience of the community that throwing a sandwich that bounces off a police officer's bulletproof vest is an 8-year federal felony crime. You ever hear the saying, don't make a federal case out of it, Janine, right? And the grand jurors said they laughed her out of the grand jury. Then she fumbled forward and brought a misdemeanor charge, which was arguably more appropriate. But you don't need a grand jury indictment to bring a misdemeanor charge. The prosecutor just signs a complaint. And the trial jury, 12 people in a wooden box in DC, sitting again as the conscience of the community, said, bye-bye, Janine, not guilty, go away, right? Those are just, and then she tried it again with another woman. She lost, Sydney Laurie Reed. Then she tried it with 6 members of Congress who did a public service announcement video saying the same thing I was taught in officer basic training at Fort Bragg in the early 1980s. We must disobey unlawful orders if we're in the military, because if we don't, the military falls apart. It's destructive if you have people obeying unlawful orders. And she tried to indict 6 members of Congress who had committed no crime. And they've done it. And of course, the grand jury laughed her out of the grand jury room again. They tried it with Letitia James and they failed. They tried it with James Comey multiple times now and they failed. And the good news is the citizens, grand jurors, and trial jurors are pushing back against executive branch abuse and overreaching corruption. The federal judges are doing the same. And when it comes to the 8647 seashell, the seashell caper, right? Comey takes pictures of seashells by the seashore and then he posts them. This is why I think I might want Todd Blanche to be the permanent attorney general. I know that's going to shock people. This dude is so incompetent. He's not good at lawyering, because what he's doing, he's going on these Fox Entertainment programs and he is handing on a silver platter defenses to people like James Comey and others, because 8647 is not a crime. I
Right.
said it. I just said it. If you say it, if you post it, if you wear it on your t-shirt, because there are merch shops that sell 8647 t-shirts, it's not a crime, because 86, the dictionary definition, is not to kill or assassinate.
Right.
It's to get rid of or remove from a menu, right? Hey, we got no meatloaf. We're out of meatloaf. You got 86
86
meatloaf
it.
off
Yeah.
the menu, right? Or you got 86 a drunk from a bar. It doesn't mean kill. The dictionary definition of that slang term doesn't mean kill. James Comey's first witness at his trial, this will never go to a trial because it's going to get dismissed on the motions, could be the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Just read the definition, case dismissed, right? So, but Todd Blanche goes on the shows and he says, well, yes, everybody says and posts in their t-shirts with 8647, but we don't prosecute any of those people. Well, that's a selective prosecution, and it's unconstitutional to selectively or vindictively prosecute somebody, because we have a due process right under the Fifth Amendment not to be selectively or vindictively prosecuted by our government. So I love that Todd Blanche runs his mouth and delivers these defenses, up on a silver platter to the people he's trying to vindictively and selectively prosecute on Donald Trump's behalf. But let me before I want to touch on Marty.
No, I
You
like
want
it. There's so
I,
much
I
to
want
cover.
I want to touch on the murder in international waters, and I want to touch on
Yeah.
Iran. But let me finish up the great seashell caper by saying I am done talking about the numbers 86-47. The numbers that I am talking about all the time are 48 and 30. And I actually have a sign on my little studio here in downtown Leesburg that I use the black Sharpie. And during the Watergate era, the people, the executive branch officials, and others who were committing crimes in concert with and for the benefit of a criminal president, Richard Nixon. When they were committing those crimes, kind of like Blanche and Nome and Patel and Bondi and the rest of them, RFK, are committing right now, I'll bet they were feeling bulletproof. I'll bet they were feeling like, hey, we're doing this for the president. He's going to have our back. We're beyond the reach of the rule of law. And then when Nixon fell from power, 48 of them were criminally convicted and 30 of them went to prison. That is a morality tale and a cautionary tale because 48, 30, those are the numbers that I hope apply and then some to Donald Trump's criminal associates in his executive branch right now because they're criming right out in the open. The drug boats murdering people in international waters. It's unlawful. There's no defense under civilian law, military law, the law of war, the law of armed conflict. None. I have a military expert, Dan Maurer, who is just brilliant on this stuff, a retired Army JAG lieutenant colonel who comes on with me regularly and talks about why this is unlawful. When we suspect somebody is in international waters with drugs on the boat heading toward the United States, that's why we have a Coast Guard. We interdict them, we seize the evidence, we bring them into a court of law in the United States, and we try to hold them accountable for any crimes they may have committed. We don't murder them. Maritza, this is
Right.
no different. This is no different than if federal officials or federal agents walked around the streets of the United States murdering drug dealers. We don't
Right.
do it. You don't.
Right.
There's no justification. So these people need to be held accountable for these crimes once the rule of law is a thing again.
So, Glenn, tell me who holds on international law? Who holds uh, anybody accountable for blowing up drug boats or whatever it might
Right.
be? Awful
Well,
activities.
if these are offenses against the United States, we have kind of extraterritorial jurisdiction. We can haul people into U.S. courts and do it, and I think that's what we need to do once we have a functioning Department of Justice. Of course, we're not involved. We're not subject to the jurisdiction of the ICC, right? We never signed the Rome Accord, and that was I think George W. Bush's decision. I hope we will rethink that. Listen, I love U.S. autonomy as much as the next guy, and I hesitate before I say we should subject ourselves to the jurisdiction of multinational courts or bodies or organizations. I don't know that argument holds water the way it used to, at least not for me.
So, Glenn, you mentioned I'm fascinated by this, because I'm sure you watch this movie, it's called Nuremberg, and it's kind of that whole accountability thing after World War II. You said you look forward to going back to the DOJ to be part of the accountability. Like, are you keeping as a prosecutor, are you keeping notes right now? Like, is this something that you're actively preparing for every day? And the follow-up is, who's first? Like, who do you think needs to be held? I mean, I think I probably know, but who's first that you would say this person needs to be held accountable right away, immediately?
Yeah, I think the first thing we do is re-indict the two cases against Donald Trump that were dismissed without prejudice, which means they can be re-indicted. That's what without prejudice means. That is the big ticket. Uh, those are the big ticket prosecutions that must move forward to fruition, win, lose, or draw. I predict when we get into a court of law proper, Donald Trump will be convicted in a New York minute, just like he was in New York, right? He's forever trying cases in the court of public opinion where there are no rules of evidence or procedure, right? And, maybe he wins sometimes in the court of public opinion. Once you move into the rule of law and he can't bloviate and run his mouth and offer propaganda to the court, he gets convicted like that. The jury in New York barely had enough time for a cup of coffee once they were tired to deliberate before they banged him out on 34 felony crimes. The same thing would happen in the insurrection case, the J6
Yeah.
case. The same thing would happen in the J6 in the classified documents case in the good news about the classified documents case, he committed those crimes after he left office. There is no presidential immunity argument there. That's an easy one, as long as it's in front of a judge who is not biased in favor of Trump. Um, so that would be the big ticket one. And then I think you work your way down, cabinet secretaries. And the reason I say you work your way down is because Merrick Garland, I still believe was a good man, but not up to the urgency of the moment, thought, well, let's go after the boots of the insurrection. These, I don't want to call them poor schlubs, but the people who were listening to Donald Trump's lies about rigged elections and stolen votes and believing it and acting on what they believed were the orders of the president. I understand why people, particularly people who maybe aren't critical thinkers, maybe they have trouble separating fact from fiction. They said, yes, sir, Mr. President, I have to go attack the Capitol and fight like hell, or I won't have a country anymore. Or he said, that's part of why I joined the Army as a young man. I was willing to listen to my commander in chief. If he said, Glenn, you got to go overseas and fight like hell, or we're not going to have a country anymore. Yes, yes, Mr. President. And I would have gone. I wouldn't have been happy about it. That's what a lot of these people at the Capitol did that day. I'm not
Yeah.
excusing it, but I understand it.
Right.
So that's why Merrick Garland treated it as a normal conspiracy where, yes, you go for the low-level criminal fish, the wise guys, and then you work your way up to the capos and the underboss and the consigliere until you get to the mob boss. Because I see the Trump administration the way I saw RICO cases I used to prosecute. You know, this is a criminal enterprise being run out of the Oval Office. But now we know this, so now you go from the top down because that's what the nation needs in this moment. You get the highest profile, most egregious violators of our nation's laws, and you work from the top down. That's the only way the accountability mission works. And to answer your question, there are a lot of people like me who are out there
Yeah.
documenting, cataloging, and trying to organize and trying to build a cadre of former feds. I'm not going to pretend we have some huge organization ready to gallop in at 12:01 p.m. on January 20th, 2029, but we're building it. We're
Yeah.
building it. And accountability is non-negotiable, right? We blew it in 74. We blew it in 2021. We didn't hold people accountable. If we don't do it the third time, if we blow accountability for a third time, I don't think we get to keep our republic.
Yeah. Before we go, I want you to talk about Iran for a bit because
Yeah.
this is a big deal. It's costing lives and money and reputation.
Yeah,
Mm.
and it's a big deal for me and my household senator because my better three quarters, Nilufar, grew up in Iran and lived through the revolution of 79 and was going to coeducational schools with boys one day and then virtually the next. She's having boys pointing rifles at her head saying, cover up more of your hair or we will kill you and your mother. And so they got out in 1983. So she is very clear-eyed in her, and she's a career immigration lawyer helping people come to this country lawfully and live out the American dream. She's like, oh, I not only have seen this movie before, I've lived through this movie before. I've had my rights revoked as a woman previously. And so, yeah, and there's still extended family over there. So this is very personal for us. This is a lawless and unconstitutional war. Nobody made that plainer than Pete Hegseth in his congressional testimony when he said, on the one hand, um, we totally obliterated Iran's nuclear capabilities during the last strike several months back. Totally obliterated. Couldn't be rebuilt ever, or maybe in many, many years down the road. And then in the next breath, he said, the nuclear threat from Iran was imminent, so we had to attack. And it was, I think, Adam Smith, the representative, if I'm not mistaken, who said, wait a minute. You said you destroyed it. How can it be imminent? And he said, well, we know that Iran had aspirations and ambitions to rebuild their nuclear program, at which point I would have cracked open the dictionary. And I said, let's talk about the definition of imminent versus the definition of aspirations and ambitions. You, out of your own mouth, Mr. Secretary, proved to the American people that one, you were lying to us, and two, there was no imminent threat justifying this war. You know, again, Pete Hegseth has to be held accountable. He is now responsible for more than 200 murders, and I use that word advisedly, of those boats in international waters. And if we don't hold him accountable for that, shame on us.
And those children, the children, I cannot quit thinking about the children in that school in Iran, and I did not know that about your wife, Glenn, but I would love to talk to Nilufar for hours because I have so many questions right off the bat. I'm so glad she's here doing the work she's doing.
So,
Yeah.
so Glenn, let me ask you this: since your wife's from Iran, and by the way, some of the most beautiful people on earth are from that region of the country. Um, the Iranians, a month or two ago, the Persians, I should say, were out in full support of this war.
Yeah.
Are they still there?
Yeah, there's a real split in the Iranian community, and I proudly call myself an honorary Persian because here in Northern Virginia, we have a huge Iranian population, and I'm typically the token white guy at every gathering, and I love that. I embrace that uh, that experience. But a lot of them, and here is my take, and this drives Nilu, my wife, to distraction because I think the Iranian people have been so horribly oppressed and mistreated and murdered in enormous numbers really since 1979 that they're like, listen, even if we know Trump is a corrupt criminal, POS, we're willing to take any liberator who comes along.
Yeah.
And I think that has been their attitude all along. I don't understand the fanfare and the "Yes, Trump will save us," because that's not a clear-eyed assessment of who Donald Trump is. He didn't save Venezuela, he ain't gonna save Cuba, and he sure as hell isn't gonna save the people of Iran. He doesn't give a rat's ass about the people of Iran, and I fear he has already made matters worse by maybe enabling even a harder lined regime to take over there. So I don't understand it. My wife doesn't understand it. We see why people are so oppressed that they're like any port in a storm. I just think if you're gonna count on an unconstitutional war and a criminal president of the United States being the one to save you, your hopes are misplaced.
I would just say if the Iranians were aspirational about having a nuclear weapon before they were attacked, they are more than aspirational right now.
Mm,
Nuclear weapon. I mean, I bet it is job one for these folks that are in there, and that's short of the Strait of Hormuz. That's another problem we've created because it wasn't properly thought out, planned for, no end game, no anything. I mean, yeah, I think there was too many shots of scotch involved before the attack was done. Quite frankly, and Trump doesn't even drink, but there's a bunch of other folks that had to have mind altering something going on. I'll tell you that. This is just for me, it's just so insane. It is so insane that it's so easy to get into wars. And if we learned anything over the last 20 years, it's how easy it is to get into wars and how tough it is to get out. And these guys didn't give a shit. They just didn't give a shit. They were full of themselves after Venezuela.
well, Glenn, do you wanna stick around while I tease John Tester for a moment?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I got one other question, and I told Maurice I'm gonna ask you this last night. We're at war.
Yeah.
I don't, I watch nightly news on occasion when I have time, and I come in and turn the TV on. There's not a
Mm,
basketball game. Why am I not seeing any coverage whatsoever about what's going on? I mean, a lot of money is going out the door every single day,
yeah,
and people's lives are being lost or screwed up. Why are
yeah.
we not seeing anything? You were part of that. Uh,
Yeah, I fault corporate media. Now, Iran is a tough place to have, journalistic boots on the ground. I'll grant you that, but that doesn't mean there aren't ways for correspondents to follow what's going on over there and bring that news to us here in the States. I just think corporate media has lost its way by and large. Um, they are always we're not missing a single Trump outrageous social media post, are we?
Right.
We're obsessing about that, and as you say, Senator, we're learning nothing about what's really going on in Iran or in that part of the world, other than, and this is adding insult to injury, we're listening to Pete Hegseth lie. about what's going on, just offer propaganda day after day after day. And unfortunately, corporate media is covering that uninterrupted with really no fact checking in real time, maybe some after people have turned to the next cable news channel after they hear what Pete Hegseth has had to say. So I think corporate media has lost its way. And I think the fourth estate is one of the things that has kept us up and running as a nation. And really nothing is more important than holding
Mhm.
government to account. But I think it's lost its way. And that's why I decided to leave corporate media,
Yeah.
almost a year and a half ago now, because I'm like, I don't feel like they're doing the service to the American people that they need to be serving, especially in this urgent moment. So that's kind of my take on it.
And that's why
And
this independent media is so good. I'll just say my other piece, Senator, that I said to you on the phone, which is the Pentagon made these ridiculous rules for what journalists had to do to keep their hard pass at the Pentagon. And all of the, like, legacy media outlets and journalists left because they weren't gonna sign on to those rules that said that everything they published had to be cleared by the Pentagon. And so what we have left in the Pentagon is, literally, what's his Matt Gaetz, I think Mike Lindell's been there, Breitbart. I mean, it's not even it's not even it's a joke. It's a complete
And
joke.
Maritza, they were absurd rules and they were unconstitutional
Well,
rules,
right.
according to a federal judge in DC. And yet, I wonder, is the Pentagon fully complying with court orders? I bet not. And that takes us back to contempt and why it's not being pursued.
fair point. Let the harassment begin. Go ahead, Maritza.
Okay, so we talked about, Glenn for AG, right?
Oh yeah.
Um, last I think it was Friday, I don't know, who knows, the days are all running together, but I woke up to all of these text messages from friends, who we all know here even, some of our friends who are at the Substack party saying, "Oh my gosh, did you see this in Politico?" And what they were referring to was this, push to get John Tester to take over as the head of the DNC. And so, Senator, I wanted to give you a chance because when I said, "Hey, how come you didn't tell me Politico called you?" I really thought your story was funny. So tell us what happened, Senator Tester, and are you gonna leave the DNC?
Well, geez, I was hoping you'd give me a little more time to think about this. I want to back up a little bit, Maritza, because um, I don't. Maybe my viewers know, maybe they're not. I actually am supporting an independent for the U.S. Senate, a guy by the name of Seth Bodner, and that's pissed off a lot of Democrats. So I couldn't even be
Mhm.
elected chair of the Montana Democratic Party, and I think it's ironic that I'm sitting in my basement watching God knows what, and a guy calls me up on my cell phone, claims he's from Politico, and asked me about being the DNC chair. I, honest to God, thought it was a prank. I thought, God, the Republicans got my cell phone number, and now they're calling me with this bullshit. And so I just said, "Man, you're doing something illegal. You're on illegal substances." Because the truth is he was not thinking critically, and and
It
and
wasn't him. People were saying to him
oh,
that
yeah,
they
but I didn't,
wanted you.
but the truth is, it was bullshit. But that aside, I think it is ironic that in the state of Montana, chances are I could never get elected chair of the Democratic Party, but yet my name is part of the national thing, which I'm flattered, I'm honored, but that is maybe the worst job in America. Uh, uh, I'll go out and pick rock or idiot cubes or whatever before I would do that. So,
So
yeah,
that's a
thank
definitive
but thank
no
God
then?
somebody's willing to do it, okay?
Yes. Okay.
But I thought
Okay.
it was a prank. Honest to God, as soon as I'm sitting here, I did not think there would be an article published the next day with, quotes with, by the way, no F-bombs in it, and there was several F-bombs I used, but he didn't quote me on that.
That's what I'm shocked that he didn't use all your F-bombs. That's kinda your trademark.
Well, I did, he just didn't report them.
That's
The
what I'm
media
saying.
and the media is just not being honest. Let's
No, 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 we're not gonna do that. We're not
no,
gonna do that.
that's true.
Well,
You know,
Glenn, it's been just a pleasure to have you on. We thank you so much. I mean, I know you said that you go on and on, but I love to hear you go on and on because it really does help me understand everything from this legal mind, and I love listening to you and the way your brain works as you're processing all this news through that legal filter. I think it gives me hope.
Well, thanks. It's great being with you. I'm glad we finally got to do this. And yeah, come back anytime. And listen, if um, Senator Tester decides to throw his hat in the ring for president, oh, I'm all in. And not because I want to be his attorney general, though I wouldn't say no.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, so we'll let you know. You'll be one of the first calls if that happens. Have you been out to Montana, Glenn?
I don't think I've ever been through the
Well,
state. No.
you're invited. I've got to tell you that we've got to if you're up for AG, just by listening to you talk, we've got to get a strong Democratic majority in the Senate
Yeah.
if you're going to get confirmed. I'm just
Yeah.
telling you.
Yeah. This gutter kid from Jersey has done some shit in his past. So, well, listen, okay, full disclosure, locked up once as a kid, but never convicted. I'm quite proud of
Oh,
that. But it was for stealing signs off a seaside boardwalk because we were going to put the signs up in the football field. So, I feel like
yeah.
it wasn't the crime of the century. And you know what? I made a lousy criminal, so I never did it again.
Yeah, but
Could
Glenn, I mean, there was a secretary who shot her dog, so I think that's
Uh,
worth defense. I want justice for Cricket. I still want justice for Cricket.
yeah.
So I think you'll
all
be
good.
okay. We need to get you to Montana, and, we're gonna work on your campaign for AG under a tester presidency, and we thank you so much for just, like, guiding us through this every single day. Again, you have to check out, Glenn's lives every night around 8:30 Eastern. Sometimes I know you kind of are flexible because you have a life, but, like, I love them, and so you have to check them out if you're not already watching.
Well, thanks, and thanks for everything that y'all are doing and for having me here today.
Back at you, Glenn. We appreciate the hell out of you. Thank you, man.
Alright, Glenn, have a great day. Alright, Senator, we'll close this out. Tell me about your hat. What are you wearing?
I really don't know what it is. It's got an airplane on it.
Ooh, Cromwell Dixon, Crossing the Divide.
Yeah, that
100 years.
it's probably a manufacturing company. Let's see if it says anything on the back.
You just throw this hat on, you have no idea.
Yeah, it has something to do with airplanes, but it's good. A nice hat. I'll tell you, it's got a nice curved brow. We don't need to talk about why the brim is important
Curve.
that it's curved. But it's good. It's a good
No
hat.
flat tops for you. I do wanna say that you had a busy Memorial Day.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. We had a busy day. Yeah, we had the Memorial Day parade in Big Sandy, Montana, and it was good. It was good. And then it was hotter than hell though, man. It was 90 degrees, and usually on Memorial Day it's snowing. We need moisture here badly, but
Yeah, you need some rain, but you drove some of your classic cars in the parade, right?
not mine, my kids. Yeah, that was good. Yeah, we
Okay.
we drove them. We worked on them, and yeah, it was good.
Guys, he even told me I could drive one of them if I drove the 4 hours up there, but, I next year, it's on my calendar
She
for next year.
instead she laid on a boat in the middle of which lake was it? Whitefish or Flathead?
Flathead Lake.
Flathead
Flathead
Lake.
Lake, one of the gems of the West.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ellie Leonard said 100% chance there were baton twirlers. Were there baton twirlers in the parade?
I don't think so, but I didn't see the parade because I was in it. I was driving
Oh, good point. Yeah,
like a '36 Ford, I think it is.
good point.
Yeah,
Alright.
so
Well,
I think there were some horses because I saw some remnants of them on the highway, but, horses are supposed to be at the back, and they put them at the front. Can you believe that? It's crazy.
that's probably because they knew you were in the parade and they wanted to make sure you
It
suffered the consequences of having them at the front.
yeah, it's all good. It's all
All right. Well, we want to thank Glenn for waking up with us early to have some coffee and chat about, headlines and DOJ and legal matters. Just really a wonderful man, and his nightly chats are amazing. So thanks to Glenn Kirschner for being on with us. We want to thank Pearl Jam for letting us use their music every episode, and we want to thank all of you folks for joining us here, both live and for the people listening later. And you can find us on where are we? Substack,
good.
YouTube,
Yeah,
Instagram,
yeah,
Blue Sky,
you got it.
and we'll chat again soon.
Mr. Test, tally ho.
Bye.